The rifle shot echoed across the valley, splitting the tranquil dawn of New Mexico territory in 1875, as Declan Prescott watched the deer collapse. The meat would feed him and his son for a week, maybe more if he smoked it proper. Hunting had become a necessity since his wife's passing 2 winters ago, leaving him to raise their boy alone on a modest homestead miles from the nearest town of Willow Creek. "Got him, Pa." 8-year-old Timothy came running through the tall grass, his small boots crunching on the dry earth. "Right through the heart. Easy now," Declan cautioned, ruffling the boy's sandy hair. "Show some respect for what gives us life." He knelt beside the fallen buck, removing his hat in a moment of silent gratitude. At 32, Declan's face had weathered under the relentless western sun, etching lines around his blue eyes that made him appear older than his years. "Can I help skin it?" Timothy asked, bouncing on his heels. "You can watch and learn," Declan replied, unsheathing his knife. "But first, we need to fix that tear in your shirt before your mother's ghost comes back to scold me for letting you run around like a wild Indian." Timothy glanced down at the large rip across his shoulder where he'd caught it on barbed wire the day before. "It's not so bad." "Bad enough," Declan said. "We'll take care of the deer, then head on home and see what I can do with needle and thread." The sun climbed higher as they worked, Declan showing his son the proper way to field dress the animal. By midday, they'd packed the meat onto their horses and made the journey back to their homestead nestled in a small valley beneath the shelter of cottonwood trees. The cabin wasn't much 2 rooms with a stone fireplace, built by Declan's own hands when he'd brought Sarah here as a bride. The memories of her still lingered in every corner, from the faded curtains she'd sewn to the herb garden now struggling without her tender care. After storing the meat, Declan sat on the porch with his son's shirt in his large, calloused hands. "Fetch me the sewing box," he instructed Timothy, who ran inside and returned with a small wooden container that had belonged to his mother. Declan threaded the needle awkwardly, squinting in the afternoon light. His fingers, more accustomed to ropes and reins than delicate work, fumbled with the thin needle. "Your mother would laugh to see me now," he muttered, beginning to stitch the torn fabric with uneven, clumsy motions. "You're making it all crooked, Pa," Timothy observed, watching with critical eyes. "It'll hold," Declan replied gruffly. "That's what matters." They both looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Visitors were rare enough to put Declan on alert. He set the shirt aside and stood, hand instinctively moving toward the rifle propped against the cabin wall. A wagon appeared around the bend in the trail, driven by a woman he didn't recognize. Beside her sat an older man with a silvery-bearded Doc Wilson from town. The wagon pulled to a stop, and Declan relaxed slightly at the sight of the familiar physician. "Afternoon, Prescott," Doc Wilson called, climbing down from the seat. "Hope you don't mind the unexpected visit." "What brings you all the way out here, Doc?" Declan asked, eyes moving curiously to the woman who remained seated. "This is Miss Zara Thomas," Doc introduced as he helped her down from the wagon. "She's come to take over the schoolhouse in Willow Creek. The town council figured she might need a place to stay while the teachers' quarters are being repaired, and I remembered your place has that extra room since." He trailed off, not needing to mention Sarah. Zara Thomas was nothing like Declan expected a schoolteacher to be. Her chestnut hair was swept into a practical but becoming knot, and her eyes, a warm amber color, met his directly. She wore a simple blue traveling dress, dusty from the journey but well made. "Mr. Prescott," she said with a slight Eastern accent, extending her hand. "I apologize for the intrusion, but the roof of the teachers' quarters collapsed in last week's storm. Dr. Wilson assured me you might be willing to rent the room for a few weeks." Declan stared at her hand for a moment before taking it briefly. "I don't know about that," he said stiffly. "It's just me and my boy here, not proper having an unmarried woman staying with us." "I assure you, Mr. Prescott, my reputation will survive," she replied with a hint of amusement. "Besides, the good doctor will vouch for my character, and I understand your son is of school age. Perhaps I could offer lessons in exchange for lodging." Timothy, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. "Pa, she could teach me reading, like Ma wanted. Declan felt the familiar pang at the mention of Sarah's wishes. She'd always insisted Timothy would get a proper education, not grow up to be just a cowboy, as she teasingly called Declan. "The school won't be ready for classes for at least a month," Doc Wilson added. "The town can pay you something for her board." Declan rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "No need for payment if she's willing to teach the boy." He looked at Zara again, noting the determination in her stance. "The room's not much, and you'd have to share our meals and such." "I'm not afraid of simple living, Mr. Prescott," Zara replied. "I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania before becoming a teacher." Declan nodded slowly. "All right then, for a few weeks until the school's fixed up." He turned to Timothy. "Help the lady with her things." Timothy darted forward eagerly while Doc Wilson began unloading a trunk and 2 valises from the wagon. Declan noticed how few possessions the schoolteacher had brought, suggesting she traveled light, unusual for Eastern ladies in his experience. "I'll leave you to get settled," Doc said after helping carry the luggage inside. "I'll be back in a week to check on things." He gave Declan a meaningful look. "Miss Thomas came highly recommended from Boston. We're lucky to have her." After the doctor departed, an awkward silence fell. Declan showed Zara to the small room that had once been his and Sarah's. After Sarah died, he'd moved his things to the main room, sleeping on a cot near the fire, unable to face the memories the bedroom held. "It's lovely," Zara said kindly, though the room was plain: just a bed, a chest of drawers, and a small mirror hanging on the wall. "It needs airing out," Declan muttered. "Been closed up a while." "I'll open the window," she replied, moving to do so. "And what were you working on when we arrived?" "I noticed you with needle and thread." Declan had forgotten about the shirt, just mending Timothy's shirt. "Boys harder on clothes than a bear on honeycomb." "Perhaps I could help," she offered. "I'm quite handy with a needle." "I can manage," he said stiffly. Zara's eyes softened. "Of course." "I'll just unpack then." Declan retreated to the porch, reclaiming his son's torn shirt and the needle. What had he been thinking, allowing a stranger, a woman, into their home? They'd managed fine on their own. But there was something in Timothy's excited chatter from inside the cabin that gave him pause. The boy needed more than Declan could provide alone. That evening, after a simple supper of venison stew that Declan prepared, Zara insisted on washing the dishes. Timothy showed her his collection of arrowheads and interesting rocks, chattering away with an animation Declan hadn't seen in months. When Timothy finally went to bed, Declan found himself alone with Zara on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamond dust. "Your son is delightful," Zara said, breaking the silence. "Very bright." "Gets that from his mother," Declan replied, continuing his clumsy stitching on the shirt. Zara watched his hands for a moment. "May I?" she asked gently. After a brief hesitation, Declan handed over the shirt. Her fingers worked quickly, undoing his uneven stitches and beginning again with neat, precise movements. "How long has she been gone?" Zara asked quietly. 2 years come November," Declan answered, surprised at himself for sharing. "Fever took her, nothing Doc Wilson could do." "I'm sorry," she said simply. "It must be difficult raising a boy alone." "We manage," Declan replied, but there was less defensiveness in his tone now. Zara smiled and held up the shirt to show her work. "There, good as new." Declan examined the neat stitches. "Much better than my attempt." She handed it back, and as their fingers brushed, Declan felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. He cleared his throat and stood abruptly. "It's getting late," he said. "I'll be up before dawn to tend the stock. Breakfast is whatever you can find. Don't expect to be waited on." "I wouldn't dream of it, Mr. Prescott," Zara replied with that same hint of amusement in her voice. "Good night." As she disappeared into the cabin, Declan remained on the porch, staring at the mended shirt in his hands. For the first time in 2 years, his solitary existence felt disturbed, and he wasn't entirely sure it was unwelcome. The days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, Declan would rise before sunrise to tend the livestock and check his trap lines. He'd return to find Zara had prepared a simple breakfast, and Timothy eagerly waiting for his lessons to begin. Initially, Declan had intended to continue his daily routines uninterrupted, but increasingly he found himself lingering, watching as Zara patiently guided his son through letters and numbers. "You're good with him," Declan observed one morning, a week into her stay, as Timothy carefully formed his letters on a slate. "He wants to learn," Zara replied. "That makes teaching a joy rather than a task." Declan noticed how the morning light caught in her hair, bringing out auburn highlights he hadn't seen before. "Why'd you come all the way out here from Boston? Must be plenty of schools back east." Zara's expression shifted slightly. "Sometimes a fresh start is necessary." She smiled at Timothy as he proudly displayed his work. "Well done, your BTKs are much improved." Declan recognized her deflection but didn't press. Everyone in the West had something they were leaving behind. He was no different. That afternoon, as Declan chopped wood in the yard, Zara approached with a glass of water. "You've been at it for hours," she said, offering the drink. "Even the strongest men need water." Declan accepted the glass, suddenly aware of the sweat soaking his shirt and the day's growth of beard on his face. "Appreciate it," he said, drinking deeply. "I was wondering," Zara began, taking back the empty glass, "if you might show me around the property sometime. I've always loved learning about new places." Declan paused, axe in hand. "Not much to see, just the homestead and some grazing land." "It's beautiful land," she countered. "And I'd like to know where I might gather herbs. I noticed your garden seems a bit neglected," Declan finished for her. "Sarah was the one with the green thumb. I've kept the vegetables going, but the herbs..." He shrugged. "I could help with that," Zara offered, "in exchange for you showing me where they might grow wild. I make remedies nothing as sophisticated as Dr. Wilson's medicines, but useful for minor ailments." Declan found himself nodding. "Tomorrow, perhaps, if the weather holds." The weather did hold, breaking clear and crisp after a night of threatening clouds. After breakfast, Declan saddled 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding and Sarah's mare, a gentle palomino that hadn't been ridden in too long. "She's beautiful," Zara said, stroking the mare's neck. "What's her name?" "Sunshine," Declan replied. "Sarah named her." He hesitated, then added, "She'd be pleased someone's riding her again." Timothy, who would stay behind to complete his lessons independently, looked up from his slate. "Ma loved that horse, said she was the smartest animal in 3 counties. "I'll be honored to ride her then," Zara said, accepting Declan's help to mount. Her riding skirt arranged modestly, she took the reins with confident hands. "I see you're surprised I can ride astride," she noted, catching his expression. "Most Eastern ladies I've met prefer side saddle," Declan admitted. "As I told you, Mr. Prescott, I grew up on a farm," Zara replied with a smile. "Side saddles are for ladies who prioritize appearance over practicality." They rode out along a creek that wound through Declan's property, the water running clear over smooth stones. Birds called from cottonwood trees, and twice they spotted deer watching cautiously from the tree line. "There," Declan said, pointing to a meadow flush with wildflowers. "Sarah found all sorts of herbs there. Couldn't tell you what they were, but she knew." Zara dismounted gracefully, tying her horse to a low branch. "May I?" she asked, holding up a small canvas bag she'd brought. "Help yourself," Declan replied, getting down from his own horse. He watched as she moved through the meadow, occasionally kneeling to examine a plant or carefully harvest leaves and stems. "Yarrow," she said, holding up a plant with tiny white flowers. "Excellent for wounds and fevers." She continued gathering, naming each plant echinacea, sage, wild mint. "You know as much as Sarah did," Declan observed. "My grandmother was a healer of sorts," Zara explained. "Not a witch, as some called her, but a woman who understood the gifts nature provides." She straightened up, her cheeks flushed from exertion. "She taught me that knowledge belongs to those willing to learn, regardless of whether they are men or women." "Sounds like a wise woman," Declan said, finding himself increasingly intrigued by this schoolteacher who defied his expectations at every turn. They continued riding, cresting a hill that overlooked the valley. Declan pointed out landmarks the route to town, the abandoned Miller place to the north, the ridge where mountain lions sometimes appeared in winter. "It's breathtaking," Zara said, looking out over the landscape. "I understand why you chose this spot." "Wasn't entirely my choice," Declan admitted. Sarah and I were heading for California. Our wagon broke down right about where the cabin stands now. While I was figuring how to fix it, Sarah walked around and declared she wasn't going an inch further. Said this was where we were meant to be. She was right, Zara said softly. It feels like a place one could call home. Declan looked at her profile against the blue sky, struck by how natural she seemed here, as if she belonged to this landscape of harsh beauty and unexpected grace. The thought unsettled him. We should head back, he said abruptly. Timothy will be wondering where we are. They returned to find Timothy had not only completed his assigned work, but had also attempted to prepare lunch, a somewhat disastrous effort involving scorched beans and undercooked biscuits. I wanted to surprise you, he explained, his face falling as he surveyed his culinary failure. Zara laughed not unkindly and ruffled his hair. A very thoughtful surprise. Now, would you like to help me make something a bit more edible? Together, they salvaged lunch, with Zara teaching both Timothy and Declan how to properly make biscuits. The simple domesticity of the scene stirred something in Declan. He'd thought long buried a longing for family, for the warmth of shared moments around a table. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Timothy fell asleep with his head in Zara's lap. She gently stroked his hair, humming a lullaby Declan didn't recognize. He's taken to you, Declan said quietly. Children are resilient, but they need tenderness, Zara replied. He misses his mother. Every day, Declan agreed, though he talks about her less now, worried it makes me sad, I reckon. Does it, Zara asked, make you sad when he mentions her? Declan considered the question. Not sad exactly, reminds me of what he's lost, what I couldn't prevent. You couldn't have stopped an illness, Mr. Prescott. Declan, he corrected her. If you're going to be living under my roof and teaching my son, you might as well use my given name, she smiled. Declan, then. And I'm Zara, not Miss Thomas, when we're not in formal company. The way she said his name soft but clear sent an unexpected shiver through him. I should put him to bed, Declan said, carefully lifting his sleeping son. When he returned, Zara had moved to the railing, gazing at the emerging stars. The skies here are different from the east, she observed. Clearer, closer somehow. Less people, less smoke, Declan replied, joining her. Though that's changing, town grows every year. Do you mind? The changes, I mean, Declan shrugged. Progress comes whether we want it or not. Can't stop time any more than you can stop the wind. A philosophical cowboy, Zara teased gently. Who would have thought? Don't let the hat fool you, Declan replied, surprising himself with the lightness in his tone. I've been known to have a thought or two between roping cattle, she laughed, the sound carrying in the still evening air. I never doubted it for a moment. As days stretched into weeks, the boundaries between them softened. Zara's presence became a welcome constant rather than an intrusion. She revived Sarah's herb garden, prepared meals that brought forgotten flavors to their table, and continued Timothy's education with a dedication that impressed Declan deeply. For his part, Declan found himself making small but meaningful changes, shaving more regularly, mending the loose steps on the porch, bringing wildflowers home when he went riding. He told himself these improvements were long overdue, nothing to do with the schoolteacher temporarily sharing their home. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm caught them by surprise. Declan and Zara raced to bring in the laundry from the line, laughing as they were soaked by the warm summer rain. They collided at the cabin door, arms full of damp clothing, faces inches apart. For a charged moment, Declan found himself unable to look away from her rain-speckled face, her lips parted slightly in surprise. Timothy's voice from inside broke the spell. Pa, the roof's leaking again. Reality rushed back as they hurried inside to place buckets under the persistent drip. For the rest of the evening, Declan was acutely aware of Zara's movements, the casual brush of her hand against his as they passed dishes at supper, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear while reading to Timothy. These newfound feelings troubled him. Sarah had been gone only 2 years. Was it disloyal to notice another woman? And Zara was temporary, bound for the schoolhouse in town once repairs were complete. Allowing his heart to stir would only invite fresh pain. The following Sunday, they attended church in Willow Creek. It was their third such visit since Zara's arrival, but this time felt different. Declan noticed the speculative glances from townsfolk, the knowing smile Doc Wilson gave him as they took their seats. After the service, several mothers approached Zara, eager to meet their children's new teacher. Declan stood awkwardly to the side until Henry Jenkins, owner of the general store, sidled up beside him. "Fine woman, that Miss Thomas," Jenkins remarked with a sly grin. "Folks are wondering if she's the reason you've started showing your face in town regular again." "She's Timothy's teacher," Declan replied stiffly. "Nothing more, if you say so," Jenkins chuckled. "Though you might want to mention that to Widow Blackburn. She's been setting her cap for you these past 6 months, and she looks ready to spit nails seeing you arrive with Miss Thomas." Declan glanced toward the church steps where Eliza Blackburn, a handsome woman in her 30s, was indeed watching them with narrowed eyes. He'd been vaguely aware of her interest, but had never encouraged it. "Miss Thomas is staying with us temporarily," Declan explained, uncomfortable with the implication. "Town council's idea, not mine." Sure, Jenkins nodded, clearly unconvinced. "Just giving you fair warning. Small towns run on gossip, Prescott. And you and the schoolmarm are the juiciest news since the Collier twins got caught skinny dipping with the preacher's daughter." Declan frowned, looking for Zara in the crowd. He found her surrounded by children, including Timothy, who was proudly introducing her to his friends. The sight warmed something in him, even as Jenkins' warning echoed in his mind. On the ride home, Timothy chattered excitedly about the upcoming school term, while Zara and Declan rode in comfortable silence. As they approached the homestead, however, Zara spoke up. "I couldn't help overhearing some comments after church," she said carefully. "It seems our arrangement is causing talk." Declan shifted in his saddle. "People always talk, doesn't matter." "It might matter to Timothy," Zara pointed out. "Children can be cruel when they think they have ammunition." Declan hadn't considered that angle. "What are you suggesting?" "Perhaps I should move into town sooner rather than later. Dr. Wilson mentioned the hotel might have a suitable room." "The hotel?" Declan scoffed. "That place is one step up from the livery stable. Besides, Doc said the school quarters wouldn't be ready for at least another 2 weeks. "Nevertheless," Zara persisted, "I wouldn't want to damage your reputation or, more importantly, Timothy's." "Our reputation is just fine," Declan said firmly. "Unless, are you uncomfortable?" "Has someone said something to you directly?" "No," Zara admitted. "Everyone has been very welcoming. It's just that I'm sensitive to appearances. In my position, a woman must be beyond reproach." They reached the homestead and dismounted. Timothy ran ahead to check on a bird's nest he'd been monitoring, leaving them alone by the barn. "Is that why you left Boston?" Declan asked quietly. "Appearances?" Zara's hand stilled on her horse's saddle. "What makes you ask that? You never talk about it, just that you needed a fresh start." Declan stepped closer. "I know something about running from the past, Zara." She met his eyes, her own guarded. "It wasn't scandalous, if that's what you're implying. I was engaged to the headmaster of the school where I taught. He proved to be different from the man I thought he was." "He hurt you?" Declan asked, a protective edge entering his voice. "Not physically," Zara clarified, "but he believed a wife's purpose was to advance her husband's career and provide children, nothing more. When I expressed my desire to continue teaching after marriage, he made it clear such independence wouldn't be tolerated." She sighed. "I ended the engagement but found myself ostracized. His influence in Boston's educational circles was considerable." "So you came west," Declan finished for her. "Where a woman might define herself by her own merits," she agreed. "Or so I hoped." Declan nodded slowly. "Then stay," he said. "Finish out the time as planned. If anyone in town has something to say about it, they can say it to my face." The simple declaration hung between them, carrying more weight than either acknowledged. Zara finally nodded. "Very well, but perhaps we should be more careful about appearances in town." "Agreed," Declan said, though a part of him wanted to declare he didn't care what anyone thought a surprising revelation for a man who had always kept his own counsel. That night, unable to sleep, Declan sat on the porch contemplating the changes in his life since Zara's arrival. The cabin felt more like a home again. Timothy was thriving under her guidance, and Declan himself felt awake in a way he hadn't since Sarah's death, both exhilarating and terrifying. A soft footstep alerted him to Zara's presence before she spoke. Couldn't sleep either. She wore a simple cotton wrapper over her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. In the moonlight, she looked almost ethereal. Just thinking, Declan replied, moving over on the bench to make room for her. Dangerous pastime, she teased gently, sitting beside him. So I've been told. He hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about what happens when you move to town. Zara was quiet for a moment. Timothy will still see me every day at school, and what about me? The words escaped before Declan could stop them. Her eyes widened slightly. What about you, Declan? I've grown accustomed to your company, he admitted. The cabin will seem quiet without you. You managed before I came, she reminded him softly. Managing isn't living, he said. Sarah taught me that, and I think I forgot it after she died. He turned to face her directly. Until you reminded me, Zara's breath caught audibly. Declan, I'm not asking for anything, he interrupted. Just wanted you to know that whatever gossip might say, your being here has been good for us. For me. Their eyes held in the darkness, the space between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Slowly, hesitantly, Declan reached out to touch a strand of her hair, tucking it behind her ear as he'd seen her do countless times. Zara didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into his touch. This is unexpected, she whispered. For both of us, Declan agreed. A coyote howled in the distance, breaking the moment. Zara stood reluctantly. We should try to sleep. Tomorrow comes early. Declan nodded, watching as she disappeared back into the cabin. Sleep, he suspected, would be even more elusive now. The following days brought a tension neither acknowledged openly. They continued their routine's lessons for Timothy, chores around the homestead, meals together, but each interaction carried new meaning. A handed cup of coffee, fingers brushing. Shared glances across the table. The careful distance maintained when others might observe them. One evening, as Declan sat attempting once more to mend one of Timothy's shirts, this one torn from climbing a tree, Zara appeared from putting Timothy to bed. Still struggling with that needle, I see, she observed, sitting beside him. Some skills don't come natural, Declan admitted ruefully, holding up the shirt to reveal his uneven stitches. But it'll hold. Zara smiled and gently took the garment from his hands. You're stitching crooked but true, she said, examining his handiwork. Just like everything else you do, I imagine. Their eyes met, and Declan felt something shift between them. What does that mean? He asked quietly. It means, Zara said carefully, that you may not always follow the expected path, but your intentions are honest. You do what needs doing without pretense. She set the shirt aside. It's a rare quality, especially in men I've known. I'm just a simple cowboy, Declan demurred, though her words warmed him. There is nothing simple about you, Declan Prescott, Zara countered. A man who reads poetry to his son at bedtime, who can track game for miles but gets flustered by a torn shirt, who built a life in the wilderness yet makes sure his son will have more opportunities than he had. That's not a simple man. Declan stared at her, momentarily speechless. You see more than is there, he finally said. I see exactly what's there, she insisted. The question is, what do you see when you look at me? The directness of her question surprised him, but Declan found he couldn't evade it. I see a woman who doesn't belong in this rough country, yet fits here better than anyone I've known. I see someone who brought light back into this cabin. He paused, gathering his courage. I see someone I wasn't looking for but found anyway. Zara's eyes softened. And does that frighten you? Terrifies me, Declan admitted with a small smile, but not enough to wish it otherwise. Before either could say more, a rider approached the cabin at speed. Declan was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle as he stepped onto the porch. In the moonlight, he recognized young Billy Hawkins from town. Mr. Prescott, Billy called, reining his horse to a stop. Doc Wilson sent me. There's been an accident at the sawmill. 3 men hurt bad. He needs Miss Thomas to help, says she knows about herbs and such. Zara appeared at Declan's shoulder. I'll come right away, she said, already turning to gather her things. I'll ride with you, Declan decided. Timothy can stay with Mrs. Jenkins next door to the doctor's office. He looked at Billy. Ride ahead and tell Doc we're coming. Within minutes, they were mounted and following Billy toward town, the moment of intimacy set aside in the face of emergency. The ride was silent and swift, each lost in their own thoughts as the urgency of the situation took precedence. They reached Willow Creek to find the town in controlled chaos. Lanterns blazed in the doctor's office and a crowd had gathered outside. Doc Wilson greeted them with relief evident on his tired face. "Miss Thomas, thank heaven. One man's leg is crushed, another has severe burns, and the third took a blow to the head. I need all the help I can get." "Of course," Zara replied, dismounting quickly. "Declan, would you mind seeing to Timothy?" "I'll take him to the Jenkins place, then come back to help," Declan promised, lifting a sleepy Timothy from his horse. Inside the doctor's office, Zara found 3 men in varying states of distress. She removed her riding jacket and rolled up her sleeves, asking the doctor for instructions as she surveyed the scene. "Burns first," Doc Wilson directed. "I've got to try to save Reynolds' leg. The head wound is stable for now." For the next several hours, Zara worked tirelessly alongside the doctor. She applied her grandmother's remedies to the burn victim, carefully cleaning and dressing his wounds while speaking soothingly. When Declan returned, he was put to work holding the man with the crushed leg still while Doc performed a gruesome but necessary procedure to set the shattered bones. Dawn was breaking when they finally stabilized all 3 men. Zara, exhausted and blood-stained, stepped outside for air. Declan followed, bringing her a cup of coffee from the pot someone had thoughtfully brewed. "You were amazing in there," he said quietly, handing her the steaming cup. Zara accepted it gratefully. "I only did what was needed." "Not everyone could have," Declan countered. "Doc said the burn victim would have been much worse off without your herb poultice." She gave a tired smile. "My grandmother would be pleased her knowledge is still useful." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the town come to life around them. The emergency had changed something between them, or perhaps merely revealed what was already there. The shared experience of working together to save lives had deepened their connection in ways words couldn't express. "The school repairs are nearly complete," Zara said finally. Doc Wilson mentioned they should be finished by week's end. Declan nodded slowly. "So you'll be moving to town soon?" "It seems so." She hesitated. "Declan, about last night, Mr. Prescott," Doc Wilson called from the doorway, "could use your help moving Reynolds to the recovery room." Their conversation interrupted once again. Declan gave Zara a look that promised they would continue later, then went to assist the doctor. By mid-morning, the crisis had passed. The injured men were stable, their families gathered to care for them, and Doc Wilson insisted Zara and Declan get some rest. They collected Timothy from the Jenkins house and began the ride home in the bright morning sunshine, the boy full of questions about the excitement he'd missed. As they approached the homestead, Timothy's chatter gradually subsided, replaced by the rhythmic sound of hooves on the dusty trail. The events of the night, both the emergency and the conversation interrupted, weighed heavily on Declan's mind. That afternoon, while Timothy napped, exhausted from the disrupted night, Declan found Zara in Sarah's garden. She had changed from her blood-stained clothes into a simple cotton dress and knelt among the herbs she'd revived during her stay. "Gathering more for your remedies?" Declan asked, approaching quietly. Zara looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun. "Yes, Doc Wilson asked if I could prepare more of the burn poultice. He was quite impressed with the results." Declan sat on a nearby stone, watching her skilled hands select and cut various herbs. "You have a gift for healing," he observed, "like your teaching." "They're not so different," Zara replied. "Both require patience and belief in possibility." She sat back on her heels, regarding him thoughtfully. "What about you, Declan? What do you believe in?" The directness of her question caught him off guard, but he found himself answering honestly. "I believe in this land. In working it honestly and passing it to my son, I believe in keeping promises." He paused. "I used to believe life was simple: you work hard, love your family, mind your business. But then Sarah died and nothing made sense anymore." "And now?" Zara asked softly. Declan met her eyes. "Now I'm starting to believe in second chances." The words hung between them, their meaning unmistakable. Zara set aside her basket of herbs and moved to sit beside him on the stone. "When I came west," she said carefully, "I wasn't looking for anything except independence, a place to teach without a man determining my worth." "And have you found that?" Declan asked. "I've found more," she admitted. "I've found a community that values what I can contribute. I've found a boy who reminds me why I love teaching." Her voice softened. "And I've found a man who sees me as I am, not as someone to be molded to his expectations." Declan's heart quickened. "Zara, I'm not an educated man. I can't offer the kind of life you might have had in Boston. Just this homestead, hard work, and whatever future we might build together." "Are you asking me something, Declan Prescott?" Zara's eyes held a challenge, but her voice trembled slightly. "I'm asking if you might consider staying," Declan said. "Not at the school quarters in town, but here. With Timothy and me." He took her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "I know it's sudden, I know there would be talk, but I also know that in the weeks you've been here, this place has felt like a home again." Zara looked down at their joined hands. "What about Sarah?" "I wouldn't want to replace her memory." "No one could," Declan said honestly. "She'll always be Timothy's mother, always be my first love, but Sarah believed in living fully. She wouldn't want me to stop living because she couldn't be here." "The town might not understand," Zara cautioned. "A school teacher is expected to maintain certain standards." "Then we'll make it proper," Declan said simply. "Marry me, Zara, not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready, when we're both sure." Zara's eyes widened. "Declan, this is too fast," he finished for her. "Probably. But out here, life doesn't always give you the luxury of perfect timing. Sometimes you have to recognize the right path when it appears, even if it comes sooner than expected." A smile slowly bloomed on Zara's face. "Your stitches may be crooked, Declan Prescott, but your heart is true." She squeezed his hand. "I won't give you an answer today. This deserves careful thought for both our sakes and especially for Timothy's." "Fair enough," Declan agreed, relief and hope mingling in his chest. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The moment was interrupted by Timothy's voice calling from the cabin. "Pa, Miss Thomas, where'd everybody go?" They shared a smile and stood together, still holding hands as they walked back to the cabin. Whatever decision lay ahead, Declan felt certain they would face it together. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Word came that the schoolteacher's quarters were ready, sooner than expected due to additional help from townsmen eager to start the school term. Zara spent hours organizing her teaching materials and preparing lessons, while Declan found increasingly flimsy excuses to delay her departure. Timothy, sensing the undercurrent between them, became uncharacteristically clingy, following Zara around the cabin and asking repeatedly if she had to leave. "I'll still see you every day at school," she assured him, as they sat on the porch swing Declan had repaired during her stay. "And you can visit me in town on weekends." "It won't be the same," Timothy said stubbornly. "Pa's happier when you're here. He doesn't look sad when he thinks no one's watching." Zara's heart tightened at the boy's perception. "Your father will be fine, Timothy. He's a strong man." "But he likes you," Timothy insisted. "And you like him too, I can tell." "It's complicated," Zara began. "Why, grown-ups always say that, but it don't make sense. If you like somebody and they like you, what's complicated about it?" Out of the mouths of babes, Zara thought, smiling despite herself. Sometimes there are considerations beyond just liking someone. There are responsibilities, expectations. Pa says excuses are just fear wearing fancy clothes. Timothy interrupted with the certainty of a child repeating a parent's wisdom. Zara laughed outright. "Your father is a surprisingly philosophical man." "What's philosophical mean?" "It means he thinks deeply about life," Zara explained, "and in this case, he might be right." The conversation stayed with Zara as she packed her trunks the next day. Declan had ridden to a neighboring ranch to help with a difficult calving, leaving her alone with her thoughts and Timothy's innocent wisdom echoing in her mind. Was she making excuses? The teaching position in Willow Creek was everything she'd hoped for: independence, respect, meaningful work. But in the weeks at the Prescott homestead, she discovered something she hadn't been looking for. A sense of belonging she'd never experienced, not in Boston, not even in her childhood home. When Declan returned that evening, covered in dust and clearly exhausted, Zara had made her decision. She waited until after supper, when Timothy had been tucked into bed with a new chapter of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, before joining Declan on the porch. "Successful calving?" she asked, settling beside him on the swing. "Two healthy calves," Declan confirmed. Hendricks was mighty relieved. Those breeding cattle cost him a small fortune to bring in from back east. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the creaking of the swing and the chorus of night insects the only sounds. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Zara finally said, Declan stilled beside her. "Have you now? Timothy believes we're making things too complicated," she continued, a smile in her voice. "Boy might have a point," Declan allowed, his tone carefully neutral. Zara turned to face him fully. "I came west seeking independence, Declan. The freedom to teach without interference, to live by my own choices. I was determined never again to let a man dictate my path." She paused. "But I've realized something important during my time here." "What's that?" Declan asked, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. "Independence doesn't have to mean being alone," Zara said softly. "And building a life with the right person doesn't mean surrendering who you are. It means becoming more than you could be on your own." Declan's breath caught. "Zara, are you saying—" "I'm saying yes," she interrupted, her heart racing. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because I need a husband or because society expects it, but because I want to build something with you and Timothy, something that honors who we each are while creating something new together." For a moment, Declan seemed frozen in disbelief. Then, with a movement so swift Zara barely had time to register it, he pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke of longing finally fulfilled. Her arms went around his neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor, all her carefully constructed reasons for caution melting away in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally parted, Declan rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he confessed. "After Sarah died, I figured that part of life was over for me. Life has a way of surprising us," Zara replied, her fingers gently tracing the line of his jaw. "When do we tell Timothy?" Declan's smile was tender. "First thing tomorrow. Though I suspect he's been planning this longer than either of us." They shared another kiss, gentler this time, full of promise for the future they would build together. True to his word, Declan woke Timothy early the next morning to share their news. The boy's reaction was everything they could have hoped for: pure joy, followed by a smug satisfaction that his grown-ups had finally figured out what he'd known all along. "Does this mean Miss Thomas won't be leaving?" he asked hopefully. "Well, I still need to move to town temporarily," Zara explained. "I have responsibilities as the teacher, and there will be talk if I stay here before we're properly married." Timothy's face fell. "How long before you get married?" Declan and Zara exchanged glances. "We haven't settled on a date yet," Declan admitted. "There are arrangements to be made, people to inform." "Why not this Sunday?" Timothy suggested. "Preacher will be in town. Everybody goes to church anyway." Zara laughed. "Weddings usually require more preparation than that, Timothy." "There are invitations to send, address to find. Seems to me the boy has a point," Declan interrupted thoughtfully. "We're not fancy people. A simple ceremony with those who matter to us would suit me fine." He looked at Zara questioningly. "Unless you had your heart set on something more elaborate," Zara considered the question. Her first engagement had involved months of planning for an ostentatious Boston wedding meant more to impress her fiancé's colleagues than to celebrate their union. The thought of a simple ceremony surrounded by the community that had welcomed her held far more appeal. "Actually, a small wedding sounds perfect," she decided. "Though perhaps not quite this Sunday, maybe in 2 weeks. That would give us time to make basic arrangements and for word to reach my aunt in Denver. She's the only family I have left, and I'd like her to attend if possible." 2 weeks it is," Declan agreed, his smile warming her heart. "I'll ride into town today and speak with Preacher Collins." The news of their engagement spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Reactions were mixed, some expressing delight, others barely concealed disapproval at the hastiness of the arrangement. Doc Wilson was among their staunchest supporters, declaring to anyone who would listen that he'd seen the match coming from the first day he'd brought Zara to the Prescott homestead. "Never seen two people better suited," he pronounced at the general store, effectively silencing a group of gossiping women. "Prescott's been half alive since Sarah passed, and Miss Thomas brings out the best in both him and that boy. Anyone who can't see that is blinder than old Jenkins without his spectacles." Zara did move into the schoolteacher's quarters as planned, but spent most daylight hours at the homestead, helping Timothy with advanced lessons and working alongside Declan to prepare for both the wedding and the upcoming school term. In the evenings, they would ride together back to town, sometimes stopping to watch the sunset from a ridge overlooking the valley. During those quiet moments, they learned each other's stories: Declan's childhood on a failing farm in Missouri, his journey west as a young man seeking opportunity, his courtship of Sarah, and their dreams for the homestead. Zara shared her own past: her parents' early deaths, her grandmother's influence, her determination to become educated despite the obstacles facing women. "I was engaged once before," she admitted one evening as they sat beneath a spreading oak. "In Boston, as I mentioned. Edward Harrington was the headmaster where I taught, 15 years my senior and highly respected in educational circles." "What happened?" Declan asked, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. Zara sighed. "I admired his intellect, his apparent progressive views on education. He courted me for a year, always respectful of my position as a teacher. But once we were engaged, he changed, or perhaps simply revealed his true nature. He began criticizing my teaching methods, suggesting I was too lenient with students. He made comments about how a proper wife should behave, how I would need to give up teaching to raise our children." Declan's arm tightened protectively around her. "Sounds like a man who wanted a possession, not a partner." "Exactly," Zara agreed. "The final straw came when he instructed me, not asked, instructed to resign my position immediately after our engagement was announced, saying it wasn't proper for his fiancée to continue working. When I refused, he became cold, saying I would learn obedience one way or another." "You ended it then?" Declan asked. "That night," Zara confirmed. "I returned his ring and informed him I would not be resigning or marrying him. He was not pleased, used his influence to make my position at the school untenable, implied to others that there had been improprieties on my part." "Bastard," Declan muttered. "Pardon my language." Zara smiled slightly. "I've thought worse about him. In any case, I decided a fresh start was needed. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in New Mexico territory, it seemed perfect, as far from Boston as I could reasonably go." "Lucky for us," Declan said softly, turning her face toward his for a gentle kiss. "I promise you this, Zara Thomas, you'll never have to choose between being my wife and being a teacher. This town needs you in that schoolhouse, and Timothy and I need you at home." "That's why I said yes," Zara replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Because you understand that loving someone doesn't mean owning them." 2 days before the wedding, Zara's Aunt Martha arrived from Denver on the stagecoach. A sturdy woman in her 50s with Zara's same amber eyes, she embraced her niece warmly before turning a critical eye on Declan. "So you're the cowboy who's stolen my Zara's heart," she declared, sizing him up. At least you're tall, good shoulders too, I suppose you'll do." "Aunt Martha." Zara exclaimed, mortified. Declan, to his credit, merely tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, pleasure to meet you. Zara speaks highly of you." "As well she should. I paid for her education after her grandmother passed," Martha replied bluntly. "Now, where's this boy of yours I've heard so much about?" Timothy, hiding shyly behind Declan, was coaxed forward for inspection. Martha's stern expression softened immediately. "Good, strong lad. Looks like his father but has a gentleness about him. That would be his mother's influence, I expect." "Yes, madam," Declan agreed quietly. "Sarah was a gentle soul." Martha nodded approvingly. "Well then, let's not stand about in the street. I've come a long way and would appreciate a proper meal and the chance to speak with my niece privately. I assume that can be arranged." "Of course," Zara said quickly. "We'll get you settled at Mrs. Beckett's boarding house, and then perhaps Declan and Timothy could see to your trunks while we have tea." With arrangements made, Zara soon found herself sitting across from her formidable aunt in Mrs. Beckett's parlor, steeling herself for the interrogation she knew was coming. "Now then," Martha began without preamble. "Are you quite certain about this marriage? You've known the man barely 2 months from what I gather." "I'm certain," Zara replied firmly. "Declan is everything Edward was not: honest, respectful, and supportive of my teaching." Martha studied her over the rim of her teacup. "And you're not simply running from one man into the arms of another, because that rarely ends well, my dear." "No," Zara insisted. "I came west to teach, not to find a husband. Declan and I, it was unexpected for both of us." Martha set down her cup decisively. "Well, you've always had good sense, Zara, even as a child. If you believe this is right, then I support your decision. But know this: if he ever mistreats you, you come straight to Denver. I've room enough and means enough to support us both." Zara reached across to squeeze her aunt's hand. "Thank you, but I don't believe that will be necessary." Martha's expression softened. "No, perhaps not." "I saw how he looks at you, like you've hung the moon and stars," she sighed. "Your Uncle Jacob looked at me that way, God rest his soul. It's a rare thing, that kind of regard." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. The small church in Willow Creek was filled to capacity, not with elaborate decorations, but with friends and neighbors who had come to witness the union of their new schoolteacher and the once reclusive rancher. Zara wore a simple gown of ivory silk that Martha had insisted on purchasing in Denver and bringing with her. "Every bride deserves something new and beautiful," she declared, brooking no argument. Timothy, scrubbed clean and uncomfortable in his Sunday best, stood proudly beside his father at the altar. When Zara entered on Doc Wilson's arm, the doctor having volunteered to give her away, Declan's face reflected exactly what Martha had described: a man looking at the woman who had hung the moon and stars in his sky. For her part, Zara felt a certainty that surprised her. This man, this place, this life, it was what she had been seeking without knowing it. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Preacher Collins spoke of new beginnings and the blessings of family. Declan's voice was steady as he promised to honor and cherish her all the days of his life. Zara's own vows included a promise to nurture both father and son in mind and spirit, acknowledging the family she was joining. When Timothy presented the rings, simple gold bands Declan had purchased from a jeweler in Santa Fe, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. And when Preacher Collins pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation spoke volumes about how the community had embraced their union. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by nearly every household. There was music from a local fiddler, dancing that lasted well into the evening, and more genuine goodwill than Zara had ever experienced in Boston society. As the sun began to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Declan found Zara speaking with Doc Wilson and Mrs. Jenkins. He slipped his arm around her waist, still marveling that he could do so openly now. "Ready to head home, Mrs. Prescott?" he asked softly. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. "Yes, I believe I am." They said their goodbyes, collected a sleepy Timothy, and rode toward the homestead in the gathering dusk. Timothy fell asleep against Zara on the ride, content and secure in the knowledge that his family was complete again. At the cabin, Declan carried the boy inside and tucked him into bed while Zara lit the lamps. When Declan returned, he found her standing in the main room, looking around with new eyes, no longer a temporary resident but the mistress of this home. Having second thoughts, Declan asked, only half joking as he came to stand before her. "Not one," Zara assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "I was just thinking how much has changed in such a short time. 2 months ago I stepped off that stage coach knowing no one, uncertain what awaited me, and now. Declan prompted, his hands settling on her waist. "Now I'm home," Zara said simply, rising on her toes to kiss him. The kiss deepened as Declan pulled her closer, years of loneliness melting away in the warmth of their embrace. When they finally parted, breathless, Declan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Zara Prescott," he whispered, "more than I thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, "my crooked stitching, straight-talking cowboy." They laughed together, the sound of their joy filling the cabin that had known too much silence. In the weeks that followed, they established new rhythms as a family. Zara rode into town each weekday to teach at the newly opened school, often accompanied by Timothy and occasionally by Declan when his work at the ranch permitted. She continued to tend Sarah's herb garden, honoring the woman who had loved this land before her, while making it her own in new ways. Declan found himself smiling more, singing again as he worked with the livestock, making plans for expanding the ranch that had seemed pointless in the years after Sarah's death. With Zara's encouragement, he began keeping proper books for the ranch operations, discovering that with careful management, they could afford modest improvements each year. Timothy thrived under the combined influence of his father's practical knowledge and Zara's academic guidance. In the evenings, the three would sit by the fire, Declan carving or mending tack, Zara grading papers or sewing, Timothy reading aloud from books Zara had ordered specially for him. "You've created quite a stir in town," Doc Wilson informed Zara one afternoon when she stopped by his office for medical supplies for the school's first aid kit. "Half the ranchers and widowers in the county are wondering if there might be more educated ladies willing to come west." "I'm afraid I've set an unrealistic precedent," Zara laughed. "Not every Eastern woman would adapt to frontier life as willingly." "Don't sell yourself short," the doctor countered. "It takes a special kind of strength to build a life out here." Prescott recognized that in you from the start, even if he was too stubborn to admit it right away. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the homestead in pristine white. Zara stood at the window watching Declan and Timothy build a snowman in the yard, their laughter visible in puffs of condensation in the cold air. The scene brought unexpected tears to her eyes, happiness so complete it was almost painful. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Timothy already asleep in his room, Declan noticed Zara's contemplative expression. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, setting aside the bridle he was repairing. "I was just thinking about paths not taken," Zara replied. "If I had stayed in Boston, if you hadn't agreed to let me stay here that first day, if any number of small decisions had gone differently, we'd have missed this," Declan finished for her, moving to sit beside her on the small sofa. "Makes a man believe in fate, doesn't it? Or perhaps just in the wisdom of taking chances," Zara suggested, leaning against him. "I took a chance coming west. You took a chance opening your home to a stranger. Best chance I ever took," Declan murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Zara smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "Then I hope you're ready for another chance, Mr. Prescott, because in about 7 months, Timothy will have a brother or sister to help look after." Declan froze, his eyes widening as he processed her words. "We're going to have a baby," Zara nodded, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Doc Wilson confirmed it yesterday. Are you happy?" In answer, Declan gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this again, a complete family, a future to build together." "Our stitches may be crooked," Zara said softly, echoing the words that had begun their journey together. "But they're holding true, Declan, and they're creating something beautiful." Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the land in pristine white, while inside the cabin, a family that had been forged through loss and hope and second chances planned for the future they would build together, a future as vast and promising as the western sky.